Under the blazing sun of a remote military base, tension hung thick in the air. Rows of soldiers stood rigid, sweat dripping down their brows, boots perfectly aligned on the coarse gravel ground. It was a day of inspection, one that none would forget. Among them stood Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, the only woman in her unit, known for her discipline, composure, and unmatched physical ability. For years, she had fought through discrimination, skepticism, and constant judgment. But that morning, none of the 282 soldiers could predict what would unfold before their eyes. Colonel Arthur Briggs, a towering figure with decades of military authority, had a reputation for being ruthless. He despised mistakes, and more so, he despised being challenged, especially by a woman. As he paced in front of the formation, his boots struck the ground with the sound of dominance. His eyes scanned his troops, then locked onto Sarah. She stood tall, unflinching, hands behind her back, gaze fixed ahead. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he barked. "Sir," she replied, voice sharp and unwavering. He marched toward her, stopping just inches from her face. The air grew heavy. "You think your performance in the last drill was satisfactory?" "Yes, sir," she answered calmly. His nostrils flared. "You think you can question my evaluation?" "No, sir," she replied, her tone measured but steady. He circled her like a predator sizing up its prey. "Then why did I hear that you corrected one of my orders yesterday? Who gave you that right?" Sarah's eyes flickered but she didn't move. "Sir, the maneuver you ordered would have caused the flank to collapse." "I acted in the best interest of the mission, sir." A murmur rippled through the ranks. The colonel stopped in his tracks. The silence stretched long, uncomfortable. Then, his voice thundered across the yard. "You're saying I was wrong." Sarah didn't flinch. "I'm saying, sir, that I made a tactical decision to prevent failure." For a moment, the colonel simply stared. Then, in one sharp movement, he raised his hand, and in front of 282 soldiers, he swung to strike her. What happened next unfolded in less than a second. Sarah's reflexes, honed through years of combat training, kicked in instinctively. She pivoted her body just enough to evade the blow, her left hand catching his wrist midair. A swift twist, a firm pivot, and the crack of bone echoed across the field. The colonel's face twisted in shock and pain as his arm bent at an unnatural angle. He stumbled backward, clutching it, his scream piercing the stunned silence. The entire unit froze. Not a breath, not a sound, only the wind sweeping through the field. Sarah stepped back, standing at attention again. Her voice was calm, steady, almost chilling in its composure. "Sir, I acted in self-defense." Two medics rushed forward, helping the colonel to the infirmary. The soldiers stood, eyes wide, minds racing. The woman they had quietly doubted had just dismantled their commanding officer in less than a second, and without losing her stance. That night, the base was alive with whispers. Some called her reckless. Others called her brave. But one thing was certain, no one would ever underestimate her again. The following morning, Sarah was summoned to the command office. Inside sat General Marcus Dean, a man known for his fairness and sharp insight. He gestured for her to sit. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he began, voice calm, "I've reviewed the footage from the yard. Would you like to explain your actions?" "Sir, Colonel Briggs attempted physical assault. I defended myself using minimum necessary force," she said firmly. The general leaned back, hands folded. "Minimum force. Yes, sir. I could have done much worse." For a moment, he studied her in silence. Then he sighed. "You broke a full bird colonel's arm, Lieutenant. That's not a small incident." "With respect, sir," Sarah said, "neither is assaulting a subordinate." There was a pause, then a faint smirk tugged at the general's lips. "You're right," He tapped a pen against the desk. Officially, this incident will be recorded as a defensive response under provocation. Unofficially, you've just made more enemies than you can count. I didn't come here to make friends, sir, she replied. I came to serve. The general nodded slowly. And that's why I'm transferring you. Transferring me, sir. He slid a file across the desk. To Delta Division. They need someone with your nerve. Her eyes widened slightly. Delta Division, the elite of the elite. Sir, He interrupted, leaning forward. Lieutenant, what you did yesterday wasn't just self-defense. It was a message. This army's changing. We need leaders who can stand their ground, even against the old guard. Consider this a promotion in disguise. Sarah saluted sharply. Understood, sir. As she left the office, whispers followed her again. But this time, there was no doubt, no mockery, only respect. Even those who once doubted her now looked with awe. The legend had begun. Days turned into weeks. Sarah's story spread across the bases, the lieutenant who snapped the colonel's arm. Some embellished it, saying she disarmed him in combat. Others said she took on 3 officers at once. But the truth was simpler. She stood her ground. Her new unit was unlike any she'd known. Covert missions, special operations, and no room for ego. There, gender meant nothing, only results did. On her first mission, she led a small team behind enemy lines, extracting hostages under fire. She earned a commendation, quietly, without ceremony. Months later, she stood before a memorial wall, reflecting on the path that had brought her there. She had faced doubt, harassment, physical danger, and yet, every challenge had shaped her into what she had become, a symbol of unbreakable resolve. One evening, as she walked through the training grounds, a group of young cadets stopped her. One of them, nervous but inspired, asked, "Ma'am, is it true what you did to Colonel Briggs?" Sarah smiled faintly. "It's true that I didn't let anyone define my worth." They nodded, admiration shining in their eyes. As she walked away, one cadet whispered, "She's the reason I joined." Word of her actions eventually reached the higher echelons of command. Policies began to shift. Stricter rules against harassment, more emphasis on equality, and greater opportunities for women in leadership roles. Years later, Sarah Mitchell would stand on the same parade ground, now as Colonel Mitchell, overseeing new recruits. Her gaze swept across the field where it had all begun, the moment that changed everything. She remembered that day vividly, the heat, the silence, the snap. It wasn't just the breaking of an arm, it was the breaking of a barrier. As the anthem played and the flags waved high, she stood proud. Every scar, every battle, every moment of defiance had brought her here. And somewhere, in the quiet of that morning, the 282 soldiers who witnessed that day would always remember, the day a woman stood tall, faced down power, and changed the course of military history forever. And then the voice fades. This is not just a story of strength, it's a story of courage, respect, and the moment that redefined authority. At the end, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel History of States for more powerful real-life military stories that change the world.